Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is a program of a debate that is fixed up by Dr. Raja Dhar, our chairperson of the scientific committee. Uh, the premise that he has fixed is asthma COPD overlap is an important entity for the physician. Now, in support of this premise, that means the pro part will be dealt by Dr. Lancelot Pinto. He is a consultant at PDJA Hinduja National Hospital and Medical Research Center in Mumbai, and the con part, following 10 minutes, will be dealt by Dr. Arjun Khanna. He is a consultant at Jasoda Super Specialty Hospital, Kausambi, UP, and Galaxy Hospital, New Delhi. Now, with that brief introduction, over to you, Dr. Pinto.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank Raja and the association for inviting us here today for this very interesting debate. Is my slide visible?
Yes, sir.
So I will be speaking on why I think asthma and COPD overlap is an important clinical entity for the physician. So this is the world that Arjun would like us to live in, a world in which the US FDA approves a drug with a really long name for undifferentiated dyspnea. When we look at the press release, it says it combines 40 mg of Lasix, 120 mg of Solumedrol, 10 mg of Albuterol, 750 of levofloxacin, and 100 of low molecular weight heparin. Anytime anybody comes to the ER with breathlessness, we just give a combination of this drug, the patient gets better and life moves on. So there's no waste of mental energy. There's no real thinking about what the patient could have. Just give a blanket approach, give a combination of ICS, LABA, LAMA to every patient with COPD and they all will be fine. But that's the mentor's wali zindagi. Let's get back to the real world. What do we know about asthma COPD overlap? We know that with increasing life expectancy, the median age of the population with asthma is going to be shifted upward. So all these individuals who had asthma in their younger years are now going to have age-related fixed obstruction, age-related emphysema, which is going to cause them to have features that are similar. The prevalence of bronchial hyperresponsiveness among patients with COPD has been reported to be as high as 60%. So if you believe that COPD is a disease in which you shouldn't get bronchial hyperresponsiveness, you may be incorrect in about half or more than half of your patients. Up to half of individuals with COPD may have FEV1 reversibility. So earlier, we used to believe that it's a fixed obstruction, there will be no reversibility. We also used to believe that bronchoprovocation tests will not induce bronchoconstriction. Both of these do not seem to be true. Around 18 to 30% of patients with COPD can have atopic features or allergic features. In the ECLIPSE study, close to 40% of the 1,400 patients had persistent blood eosinophilia greater than 2% during the 3 years follow-up. So if you gave these individuals just dual bronchodilators, maybe you wouldn't do them good. Severe or late onset asthma or among those with chronic infections or those who smoke can exhibit neutrophilic inflammation and CD8 cells in the airways, which we ordinarily or normally classically associate with COPD. In the Childhood Asthma Management Program study, they found that the FEV1 by FVC ratio was significantly lower in subjects with asthma than controls, and these deficits were already present at 6 years. So at 6 years of age, already your ratio was less than what was predicted. In the Busulfan longitudinal study, it was found that smoking may have more severe effects on lung function in subjects with a baseline history of asthma. So you may have asthma, you still smoke, and then you have more severe outcomes as a result of the overlap. Children with asthma were 6 times more likely to have airflow limitation consistent with COPD at the age of 60 to 65 years than those without childhood asthma. And fixed airflow obstruction in non-smoking adults who had childhood asthma was equivalent to that observed with the 33 pack year history of smoking. So if you believe that the lines are very clear, that COPD is COPD and asthma is asthma, you will realize that longitudinal studies of individuals, of large cohorts of people, are telling us that it's not that clean. There is an overlap. These individuals tend to have more severe disease. These individuals tend to do not so well. This is a systematic review and meta-analysis of 19 studies, which found that the pooled prevalence of the overlap was about 27% in population-based studies, 28% in hospital-based studies. There was no difference between ACO and COPD in terms of gender, smoking status, lung function, and 6-minute walk distance. But in comparison to just a subject with only COPD, people with the overlap were significantly younger, had a higher BMI, they utilized healthcare more, and had a lower overall health quality, health-related quality of life. So if you have features of an overlap, you are likely to have more severe disease at a younger age, and you are likely to exacerbate more frequently, which is why you will have more healthcare utilization. This is why it is important to identify individuals who have features of overlap. This was from the ECLIPSE, where they compared COPD patients with and without overlap features. The question asked was, have you ever had asthma? About a quarter answered yes. 94% reported this being confirmed by a doctor. And in these individuals, the proportions of comorbidities were higher. 66% had at least one of osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, reflux, heartburn, depression requiring treatment, anxiety, panic attacks, versus 43% in COPD patients who did not have any overlap features. There were also a higher proportion of autoimmune diseases and inflammatory bowel diseases compared with 5% in those without ACO. What about the overlap among Indians? Among women with COPD, bronchial hyperresponsiveness can be observed in up to 90% of individuals. So if you go by the spirometric definition, there would be a fixed obstruction. You would label these individuals as having COPD, but if you challenge them with a bronchoprovocation test, you will find them to be hyperresponsive in up to 90% of individuals. Biomass-associated COPD is associated with a higher eosinophil count, a higher airway wall thickness, a chronic bronchitis kind of a phenotype, and better bronchodilator reversibility, suggesting that this biomass-associated COPD may have features of asthma. So then you say, okay, fine, there is an overlap. There is a subset of the disease that has features of both. Then why not just give triple therapy for everyone? And these are two large studies which are being used a lot nowadays to suggest that triple therapy is for everyone. There is the CHRONOS study and there is the ETHOS study. And I'm sure Arjun will allude to these studies because these studies are being used as the strongest evidence that inhaled corticosteroids should be given to patients with COPD. But let's look at the finer details. If you look at the left versus the right, this is when you subdivide the individuals based on their eosinophil counts, whether they have less than 150 cells or greater than 150 cells per cubic millimeter. If you look at triple therapy versus dual bronchodilators, the real difference is only if you have greater than 150 cells per cubic millimeter. So only if you're an eosinophilic phenotype does triple work better than dual. If you look at the right side of the screen, in individuals, this is comparing ICS-LABA versus triple therapy. You notice here that there is no difference between the two groups, irrespective of eosinophils, suggesting that the difference comes from the second bronchodilator and not really because of the ICS. So both the groups had ICS. So this is ICS-LABA versus triple. The benefit is seen with triple, irrespective of eosinophil count, but that's because the triple has an extra bronchodilator. It's not because of the ICS component. The benefit in lung function versus dual was only in patients with a blood eosinophil count greater than 150. However, when you look at adverse events, if you look at the top line of this slide, you will see triple therapy had a rate of treatment emergent adverse effects, which were about 18% versus 15% in the dual and ICS-LABA arms, suggesting that there may be an increased rate of adverse events, and that's what we're worried about. Let's look at the ETHOS trial, 8,588 patients, large trial looking at frequency of exacerbation. So the first trial looked at FEV1 as their main endpoint. This trial looked at frequency of exacerbations. And you look at the two slides here. And again, this is subdivided based on the level of eosinophils. When you notice eosinophils less than 150, look at the left side of the slide, it is not a statistically significant difference favoring triple therapy. In the group that has eosinophils greater than 150, yes, there is a difference there. But what most people will end up telling you is that all patients benefit just looking at the bottom pooled effect, which is not really true once you tease it out based on the eosinophil levels. If you look at the right side of the slide, you see the same features. In the eosinophils less than 150, there is a benefit, but this is when you're comparing triple to ICS-LABA. Again, similar to the earlier argument that it's the extra bronchodilator that adds the effect and not really the triple therapy. Again, look at the adverse effect profile and if you look at the first set of, if you look at my cursor, look at the confirmed pneumonia. If you use triple, you have about a 4% chance of a pneumonia. If you use dual, it's 2.3%. And if you use ICS-LABA, it's 4. So 4% when there's an ICS combination, 2% when there's no ICS. Summarizing, and I got this interesting slide which look at whether you want to be a lumper in life or you want to be a splitter. So a lumper likes to put everything in one common pool. A splitter likes to get some finesse. And look at the data cases. Are your population features normally distributed? If they are not, you should probably do better splitting. Which of the part of your data is your focus? Do you want to look at the tails as specialized physicians? You want to look at individuals who are different. You don't want to lump them together. You don't want to overgeneralize, and you want to act with the best with the data that you have available. So the use of ICS comes at a price. The use of not using ICS also comes at a price. So you really need to know who your patient is. Is it eosinophilic? Is it not eosinophilic? ICS response tends to parallel eosinophil levels. So if your patient does not have an eosinophilic phenotype, he's not likely to benefit. Bronchodilators are the backbone of a prescription for COPD. ICS only if there are overlapping features. And ICS are the backbone of a prescription for asthma. A one-size-fits-all approach will always come at a price, either the price of adverse effects or the price of inadequate therapy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pinto. There is, as you said, there is a price for everything. Lumping together is difficult. Splitting too much is also difficult. Anyway, to give us the other side of the story, I will now invite Dr. Arjun Khanna. Dr. Khanna, please, over to you.
So good evening, sir. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you, Dr. Rajadhar sir, for inviting both of us here today. Very interesting, Lance. So Lance has said why asthma COPD, overlap is an important clinical entity for the physician, and I'll try to counter him a little bit. Now look at this slide. I'd like to introduce, this term to you. This term is intractome. Now, what is an intractome? An intractome is how, genes, when they express how finally a disease comes to being. And if you see, these are the intractomes. The green is asthma, the pink is COPD. If you look at the similarities between these two, that is highlighted in the blue chart over there, the blue diagram over there. And if you look at the differences between the genes that express these two diseases have been expressed in the white diagram over there, which is fairly large. So this is what an intractome is, but then this is what Lance has to say. What intractome? Why confuse us with all these big terms? Let's just keep it simple. Why do you need to stress ourselves? Let's not understand the finesse. He's been talking about finessing things, and then he says that let's just understand everything as echo. Let's lump everything together, and that's what we should be doing. Well, Lance, what I would want to say here is that this term, ACOS, ECHO, whatever you call it, it's basically an oversimplification. The British were always right from the very beginning. England, they've ruled the world, smart people versus the Dutch, small little country, nice people riding bicycle. So we know who's more prone to be correct here. And 2021, Lance, this is what you were talking about, lumpers and splitters. So sad that this eco fraternity is still lumping things. We need to be splitters. We need to individualize. We need to phenotype the diseases, and we need to treat them accordingly. We should not be, in 2021, we should be not lumping things together. Asthma, treated as asthma. COPD, treated as COPD. This term overlap, asthma, COPD overlap, has been now around for 40 years. And in the right-hand side, you can see this beautiful, graveyard, which is from Montreal, where Lance is trained. So this is where this term should go now. Lance, let me say this. If a clinical entity is so important, why is there no definition, no diagnostic criteria, no severity indices, no management guidelines, no prognostic guidelines till date? We had COVID for 1 year. We have the vaccine out. We have protocols out. Had this thing been so important, had this been a life-changing disease entity, why still there does not exist even a single definition for this disease? there is the spirometric criteria, Korean definition, Spanish definition, and then that sad little gold GINA cage. You know, I call it a cage because that is what it looks like to me, which has been, proposed for defining this disease. And this is what this looks like. Now, don't tell me that this is not an oversimplification. Look at the clinical features of COPD, look at the clinical features of asthma. Put them down on a paper like a first-year MBBS student would do, and then compare. If there are three things which are similar to each other, label this as asthma and COPD. And that is so sad, This cage has always been the last chapter of both GOLD and GINA guidelines. Chapter number 10, the last chapter, when the guidelines, the meeting got over, post-lunch session, I think that is when this chapter was written. And look at people, this very interesting article which dissects the GOLD GINA cage definition or whatever you call it for asthma COPD overlap. And this is what Alberto Papi, the big daddy of bronchial asthma COPD, has to say, that this artificial construct has been made to label, which is nothing more than the clinical evolution or expression of two clinical heterogeneous conditions. This cage has been built to force overlapping features of both asthma and COPD. And the problem of labeling this term, of using this term loosely, is you are basically comparing, one population, for example, an asthma, which is a patient with asthma who has got a fixed airflow limitation, to a totally different person who has got COPD, but his blood eosinophil levels are high. So these are absolutely chalk and cheese, but you are combining them into one definition and you are labeling them as one disease, which is really sad. Now, this is supposed to be the SIN definition of COPD, of asthma COPD overlap. And this made a wave in all the ACOR's life. Lance was so happy when this definition came in 2016, because all the ACOR's said that finally, we've done this now, and we now have a definition for asthma COPD overlap. And they had major criteria, they had minor criteria. And they said that, yes, if you look at the data, we have had meta-analysis and all these analyses Lance has already showed you. They said that this definition is going to fit the bill beautifully. And this is, really going to define asthma COPD overlap very well. So they had major criteria, and for major criteria, you needed all of these four to be satisfied, that asthma COPD overlap, the age of onset had to be more than 40 years. How strange is that? When you say that asthma COPD overlap, it affects younger people more. However, when you're using a diagnostic criteria, age has to be more than 40. The PFT has to show airflow obstruction. There has to be exposure of more than 10 pack years of tobacco or equivalent indoor or outdoor airflow, exposure to pollution. How do you measure adequate exposure to pollution? I still don't know. No mention of post-infective, post-tubercular or biomass fuel here, which is probably one of the most important pretext of treating asthma COPD overlap in our country. And if a patient has had asthma before the age of 40 years, then you needed to demonstrate at least 400 ml change in FEV1 with a bronchodilator. Minor criteria, you had documentation of allergic rhinitis or atopic disease, 12% and bronchodilator response more than 200 ml, and peripheral serum eosinophil counts more than 300. Now, why am I going through this horrible cage again? Let me show you how these definitions fall flat on their face. Now, I asked my PG to pick up one of the so-called labeled asthma COPD overlaps from our OPD, and let's put the SIN definition on him and let's try it out. 60-year-old female, village dweller from Uttarakhand, comes from a farming family, gradually progressive shortness of breath for 4 to 5 years. So symptoms have started after 40 years of age. Gradually productive cough. She smokes 4 to 5 BDs per day. Biomass fuel exposure is present, and she's had history of TB, query TB 25 years back, for which no records are available. So the orange ones that I'm showing were favoring COPD. Then there is history of hives, there is history of acute urticaria, sneezing, and epiphora, and she's on levocetirizine for almost 5 days a week. Daughter has bronchial asthma. She's on MDI of formoterol with budesonide, and her cough and breathlessness increase with change of season. So there were features of asthma and COPD both. And if you look at the GOLD GINA cage, obviously this would be labeled as ACO. And let's go back to the SIN definition. Now, this lady is on formoterol, she's on salbutamol, and she's badly controlled because she's finishing 1 canister in around 2 weeks. She's on oral doxycycline, she's on cetirizine. She has maxillary sinus tenderness. She has itchy eczematous lesions all over the body. A frail lady, she is wheezing bilaterally. And her IgE levels are high. Absolute eosinophil counts are normal. Most of the other evaluation which was done was normal. Sputum eosinophils levels, because we don't really have them, we did not do. And her FeNO was again normal. look at this spirometry. In spirometry, for it to be classified as echo as per the SINS classification, the bronchodilator response has to be at least 40%, because our patient's symptoms had started after 40 years of age. So our patient's bronchodilator reversibility was not 40%. So this is utter confusion. This is what leads to so much of trouble. As per one definition, as per international guidelines, this is asthma COPD overlap. As per another definition, if you look at the SINS criteria, all this leads to is trouble. I don't know why the echoers were so happy about this definition that finally we have cracked it. It's been around for 40 years. You still do not have a definition, for God's sake. Now let us come to the echoer's thought process. Whenever you talk about asthma COPD overlap, as you've just heard Lance, they always talk about asthma with fixed airflow obstruction, and then you have COPD with reactive airways disease. And always, their argument regarding this is these two populations, that these are the two populations which should be labeled as asthma COPD overlap. Now let's try and dissect that. Fixed airflow obstruction in bronchial asthma. So asthma in its own evolution can develop fixed airflow obstruction as the disease becomes more severe. And as the disease, in a long-lasting disease, up to 30% of patients with severe asthma would develop fixed airflow obstruction. So does that mean that this airflow obstruction has changed the patient from asthma and he has now become an asthma COPD overlap just because his airway obstruction has become fixed? I don't see any sense in that. There is good evidence to show now that even when the asthmatic airway has become non-responsive, if you study the inflammation going on in that airway, the inflammation is going to be same as early asthma. The lung compliance in these patients and the response to treatment often remains same in these patients. So call it by its name, call it asthma with fixed airflow limitation and treat it like that. Why do you need to give it a fancy name, asthma COPD overlap? The other happy term, happy place of echoers, positive bronchodilator response in COPD. Now, if a COPD patient, Lance has already said, up to 60% of them can have bronchodilator response. If this response is shown in patients with COPD, the patient is doubted of having a asthma COPD overlap kind of a soul. But Lance, why should bronchodilator response be considered a physiological characteristic which is exclusive only to asthma? We have seen lots of studies, even you've shown that substantial responses to bronchodilators have been reported in patients with COPD, especially with the newer, good, potent ultralabas and ultralamas. This is the UPLIFT trial, very famous UPLIFT trial, where, as you've already said, that more than 50% of the patients did actually show bronchodilator reversibility when they were given tiotropium. So in the absence of any smell of asthma, in a large proportion of patients of COPD, they would show bronchodilator reversibility. So call it by its name. This is COPD with substantial response to bronchodilators. How does this become asthma COPD overlap? Lance's favorite blood cell, the blood eosinophil. All echoers love this cell because, in the general population, if you see, I'm not talking about asthma and COPD, I'm talking about the general population. Every patient, every person, if you study a cross section of, say, people who are living in India, the eosinophils would have a normal distribution as it would happen for every biological measure. Why should it be different in patients who have COPD? There is good evidence to show that it is similar. The biological distribution, the bell-shaped curve of eosinophils is similar in patients with COPD. So why does this mean? How does this say that? How do you interpret this? That if a patient of COPD has more than 300 blood eosinophils per microliter, why should he be closer to asthma and he should be blamed of having an echoish condition? And since when is asthma a prerequisite for diagnosis of blood eosinophils? We never diagnose asthma on the basis of blood eosinophils. Call it by its name, COPD or asthma with an eosinophilic profile. And it would be a good, useful predictor of response to treatment. For example, inhaled steroids. Why do you want to label this as asthma COPD overlap? Then asthma COPD overlap, there's this definition that, is this actually eosinophilic COPD? I've already said this eosinophil cutoff value has been derived from arbitrary thresholds from the COPD gene study. We do not have Indian data as of now. What is the cutoff value for eosinophils in asthma and COPD? So just mimicking the Western values of asthma and COPD in our population doesn't make any sense. Very interesting paper where they've actually said that asthma COPD overlap, this echo term actually is probably a phenotype of severe asthma, because what they studied was that the definition which has been prescribed or been propagated for asthma COPD overlap, if you dissect that definition, patients who have fixed airflow limitation or who have advanced asthma as per ERS ATS guidelines, the definition overlaps with asthma COPD overlap. More than half of the patients who were recruited for the dupilumab trial, if you look at the clinical criteria, if you go back to those patients, if you actually see their clinical history, because of the persistent airflow obstruction and because of poor lung functions and because of lack of reversibility due to advanced asthma, these patients would have been denied of giving them dupilumab and of the good effects of dupilumab. And if you had followed the gold GINA cage criteria, those boxes, those small little sad boxes, these patients would have been denied the utility of biological therapy, and these patients would be treated with inhaled steroids or increasing the LAMA/LABAs or bronchodilators, which should have not been the case. And thankfully, this was not so. Very interesting study, 18,000 European patients, adults, 9-year follow-up. What they found out was that so-called labeled asthma COPD overlap patients, they have identical risk factors, clinical characteristics, and lung function decline similar to asthmatic subjects. And this is what is more important, this patient who has been labeled as asthma COPD overlap, just because of these functions, because the decline is more rapid, just because the patient is sicker, probably has severe asthma and should be treated as severe asthma, should be phenotyped, endotyped more to actually find out what he has, rather than dumping him as asthma COPD overlap. Peter Barnes had written an obituary about asthma COPD overlap as early as 2006. This is the big daddy of asthma COPD, Peter Barnes, and he wrote an obituary in 2006, and he found out that COPD and the inflammation in COPD showed similar inflammation profile to severe asthma, including neutrophils, lymphocytes, and a lot of similar, clinical mediators. Both of them respond poorly to, severe asthma and COPD. They both respond poorly to steroids. And this data set also suggested that what was called as ACOS in those times was actually a phenotype of severe asthma and not asthma COPD overlap. Last couple of slides. What are the problems of oversimplification? Why I want to move away from this asthma COPD overlap is airway diseases are already poorly managed in our country. And you are actually doing a wrong thing by, a good pulmonologist like Lance would understand what is asthma, what is COPD, and what he wants to label as asthma COPD overlap. Majority of asthma COPD in our country are still managed by physicians and not expert chest physicians. We still have very poor management of asthma and COPD in our country. And rather than understanding what the disease pathologies are, we are actually teaching our postgraduates and the younger generation to lump them together, label this as asthma COPD overlap, take the easy way out, give them everything together. And by this, as Lance has already said, you give inhaled steroids to a population where it is not actually required, it is going to cause complications. And, these imperfect definitions have denied the entry of severe asthmatics into trial for novel agents, and we have been depriving them of the benefits of such therapy. And look at Indian obstructive airway disease. We are different from the West. We have biomass fuel associated lung disease, post-tubercular, post-infected, pollution related, and all of this because it shows some features of asthma, some features of COPD. Rather than actually finding out what these diseases are, we are lumping them together as asthma COPD overlap. So just summarizing, call things by their proper names because they have treatment implications. Don't force diseases into comfortable boxes and cages because you don't understand what they actually are. Probably over the next few years, this term would not exist at all. There are treatment modalities available for severe asthma, severe COPD. There are upcoming biologicals which we can use. Benralizumab is going to be launched in our country next month, and we are still looking at a drugs disease entity for which people have written obituaries in 2006. Phenotyping is the key. Endotyping is the key. The future belongs to us splitters and not lumpers. Actually, Lance, it is us. It is me who's trying to split it into asthma and COPD and not lumping it together as this useless entity of asthma COPD overlap. I thank you very much. Over to you,
over to you, Dr. Pinto. You have 2 minutes of rebuttal. 2 minutes, please.
So Arjun is very smart, clearly, but he's not addressed the fact that why is it biologically implausible that a person who has exposures like cigarette smoke or biomass or whatever and develops COPD can also have atopic features. It's not like Mother Nature says that, okay, if you have asthma, you can smoke all you want, but you will never have COPD type features, or vice versa. Or, if you have biomass fuel exposures, you cannot develop a fixed obstruction. So why is it biologically not plausible that there are two entities which come together and therefore manifest in as a joint form? The other thing that Arjun really didn't address is that at the end of the day, as physicians, at the end of the day, why is it important for us to give a label to a disease? It's because treatment changes. So we want to label a disease as an overlap because we want to decide whether or not to give ICS to individuals who otherwise would be just COPD, not deserving ICS, or whether to give dual bronchodilators to people who would otherwise be just asthma and would be on ICS or ICS LABA or ICS SABAs alone. So that is the reason why I think the strong take-home message is that we need to identify that there are individuals who will have features of both, and treatment therefore needs to be tailored to these individuals accordingly.
Thank you. Over to you, Arjun, for your comments for 2 minutes.
Absolutely. So Lance, 2 points. First point, why cannot a patient of, as you very correctly said, why cannot a patient of COPD have atopy? He can have all the atopy in the world. My question is, why do you want to lump him and dump him together as asthma COPD overlap? Is it necessary that if a patient of COPD has allergies and atopy, he is bound to develop asthma? Probably it is just COPD with allergy. Treat this patient with levocetirizine, cetirizine, or whatever anti-allergic you want to. You might take care of his allergy. How does that prove that this patient has asthma COPD overlap? This could be very well an asthmatic with atopy. The other point, actually, this is the point that I wanted to raise, and you've done the job, you've made the job very easy for me. We want proper labels, my friend. This asthma COPD overlap, this reminds me of the term idiopathic. When you don't understand anything, label the things as idiopathic. And this is the easy way out. When you don't understand what phenotype of asthma or what, why is this patient not responding to therapy, or how is he different from run-of-the-mill asthma or COPD, rather than trying to find out, rather than trying to phenotype him, I think this is taking the easy way out. It is just giving him a nice, comfortable diagnosis. Saturday evening OPD, last patient in the OPD. Kaun kare abhi itna tamjham na? Let's label this as asthma COPD overlap. Let's treat him with everything. Anyways, 90% of the times he's going to get okay. So I think, Lance, this is the easy way out. And we need to split.
Thank you. Thank you, Arjun. Well, I have 4 minutes. Now, you see, long before I became a doctor, in 1959, they held a SIBA guest symposium on defining asthma. So it's more than half a century now that physicians have been debating asthma. In our younger days, we used to call it asthma and chronic bronchitis with emphysema. The problem is chronic bronchitis was defined on clinical terms, emphysema was defined on anatomical terms, and asthma was defined on physiological terms. Then later on, as you grew up, the term COPD got in. The fact of the matter is, people with airways diseases present with a variable combination of clinical and laboratory features. Sputum production, degree of airway obstruction, degree of reversibility to which drug, short-acting beta agonists, ipratropium, and what have you, sometimes steroid. You test the same patient in December, he gives you one impression. You test the same patient in May or April or May, he gives you another impression. This as both of you have mentioned, this is Monica Croft and Peter Barnes had a very good pro-con debate roundabout in about, I think it was 2005. So it's been going on. And the problem is, with you people, it's all right. You have time to go through literature. You can read a gold guidelines, which is revised every year. You see, if you revise a document every year, that means you haven't understood anything. You see, and just imagine somebody practicing in a small town or a village, and he is being faced with people presenting with sputum, cough, breathlessness, and wheezing. Even if he has an access to a PFT, the reports are usually not with his patients. There lies the problem, you see, of lumping and spitting them together. I think this enigma has not yet been solved. And it will take more time for us to understand. Asthma has phenotypes, COPD exacerbations have phenotypes. And once you mix up one phenotype and start comparing with another disease, it's very, very difficult. For people like you, it may be all right, but it's very difficult for busy practitioners. Let me finish by telling you a story which happened more than 40 years ago. I had a good fortune to spend 2 weeks at Brompton Hospital in 1979. Dr. Margaret Turner Warwick was then the professor of and head of the Department of Respiratory Medicine at Brompton. She told us that, look, someday you will have to classify airways diseases like you classify cancer. For cancer, it's T, M, and N, tumor, node, and metastasis. For airways diseases, it will be obstruction, sputum production, and reversibility. For example, O3R3 will be asthma. You see, and that's how someday we will have to make a compromise formula of, and now we have 2, maybe 3 pigeon holes in which you will have to fit in all your airways diseases. Is it asthma? Is it COPD? Or is it ACO, as is being propagated now? But there are plenty of others who wouldn't fit into any one of those 3. You see, and there lies the problem with airways diseases. But anyway, I thank both of you for being so thorough in revising and garnishing your arguments in favor of one way or the other. But the final truth will probably take a little more time. We will have to know more about. You see, this is a day of molecular biology. You see, we started with organ pathology, then we went to cellular pathology. Now we are in the era of molecular biology. And that's how these biologics are coming into treatment with different diseases. So maybe in another 10, 15 years, we will know much better whether to lump them together or can they be treated in the same way. Thank you, both of you and the organizers, for giving me the chance to share this interesting session. Over to you, Barun.